SICM and the Salam Center, and in 2005 he received a CBE. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum, sisters and brothers. I know I am standing between you and your prayers, so we'll take exactly to the Maghrib time, inshallah. What we have planned is 3 talks on Orientalism. Today we will talk about the popular imagination about Orientalism. Next week we will talk about the academic understanding of Orientalism. And then finally, in the 3rd week, we will talk about how this shapes political attitudes and other things. And you will be surprised to discover that it's not as simple as it seems. It becomes very complicated and quite disturbing. So let's start with this light-hearted look. So some of you may remember that last year we had a cold spell, and all the papers were saying beast from the east. Now there is a very subtle message there, that the east is wicked. I mean, it's only a weather pattern coming from there. It's nothing to do with the people there or anybody else. But just saying beast from the east gives you a picture that these guys there are sending all this trouble to us. And this is typical of how you shape people's imaginations. So you can see, for example, another one in the 70s, it was quite common, saying that there is nothing wrong with bribing wogs. The chairman of British American Tobacco, for example, said, I don't see anything wrong in bribing wogs. Why are you making so much noise about it? When Tariq Ali exposed this kind of thinking on the board, at the board level, he said there is nothing wrong in this, because these are, so wogs, in British terms, it looks like a person who is not white. That means if he's not white, you can bribe them. In Australia, it means a foreigner or an immigrant. Although those guys themselves are all foreigners and immigrants. Or in Egypt, sometimes it was used as working on government service, Indian workers in Egypt. Generally, it means these people are not people. You can not treat them as equals to you. Or we hear sometimes this idea of the yellow peril, which is referring to the Chinese. The Chinese are going to come and take over. The yellow race is going to come and take over. Again, creating an image of the Chinese that they are evil. Or during Brexit, you saw these advertisements from the parties with people like Johnson and others saying that if we remain, we will have the Turkish hordes taking over. And they show these pictures of Turks, 80 million Turks coming into the UK. Okay? This is not new. In older times, we had this idea of savages, people who are not white. They need to be civilized by us, including missionaries and so on. So the famous words of Bishop Tutu comes to mind there. One day they asked Bishop Tutu, how do you feel about apartheid? He said, look man, when you came here, we had the land and you had the Bible. Now we have the Bible and you have the land. So what's the point in all this? Okay? And same thing with slaves, which we look later on. Sometimes, even now, refugees here are being referred to as cockroaches. This is all popular imagination of what do you think of the East or Orient or so on. Yeah? And it sinks in. It makes up your thinking, your attitudes, your behavior, and so on, as we will see next time and on. But it is not one way, right? During Mughal times, when the British started to come, there was something else. First, in terms of the West, there was the exotic Orient. People actually here used to wear Arabic dress because that was considered to be civilized before their perceptions started to change. And you had things like the Arabian Nights and harems and, all kinds of things in the imagination of the West. and this Marco Polo's book on the Silk Road and so on, right? But slowly it started to change with the Crusades and things when we went into the barbaric East. The word barbarians comes from there. Or you went into heathens and savages, as we saw. But in India at that time, Britain was referred to as that industrious North Sea island. Can you imagine now somebody telling you that you are part of an industrious North Sea island, Britain? You wouldn't recognize, but that's what it is, yeah? It is a small island in the North Sea. Slowly it became the British Empire and British Raj. And when it came to British Raj, you had colonialism, and then the fight against colonialism and so on. And we will see in the last part how people like Gandhi, for example, were referred to by Churchill as that naked fakir. Because Gandhi used to wear a dhoti, and sometimes when it was hot, he didn't used to wear anything on top. Now, the thing is, how did this Orientalism transform into anti-Islam or anti-Muslim feeling? The key one, of course, was the defeat of the West, of the Christendom in the Crusades. Now, that was a big problem because they went to capture Jerusalem. They had hundreds of years of fighting. They killed and rampaged everything, yet had to come back. And so it now became anti-Muslim. So this was perceived as the immediate threat, Orientalism. Then, of course, the Muslim and colonial subjects' participation in the First and Second World War was colossal. You know that about 3 million people from India participated in the war effort. About 500,000 lost their lives. Who knows about that? You could treat them as people who are useless. But the war had one big impact. When people from India, Muslims and others, came and fought side by side with these people, they started to understand that contrary to their perceived imagination, these people were no better or worse than them. They could easily defeat them. So when they went back home, they started to think of getting rid of them. So they said, now we can do it. It's not like before the British were putting an image that we can do anything, you can't do anything, you have no got the guts to do it. Now they say we have it. And so it went into colonialism and anti-colonial struggle. Soon, now, it started to morph into Islamophobia. And we will see next week how the Abrahamic religions became the Judeo-Christian world. What happened to Islam? Which was integral to the whole thing. And you see how these things are shaping discourse. So today, as we move on, and we look at the discourse from this far right, the hate preachers, even mainstream politicians, it becomes Islamophobia. The Muslims are the problem, not the solution. And I remember clearly one of the key statements of Baroness Warsi. Now, she was the chair lady of the Conservative Party that time, right? She has to make only one statement because she is mixing with them all the time. She says, unfortunately, Islamophobia has passed the dinner table test. And she was out from everywhere. Chairman of the Conservative Party, cabinet member, out from everywhere because of saying that when I sit with them, the way they talk about Muslims is unacceptable to me. It is smacks of the old transformed Orientalism into Islamophobia. So inshallah next week, we'll take up this battle in academic circles, particularly look at Edward Said's work on Orientalism, and others, and then after that we look at political